Hey guys, so I'm going to just really quickly walk you through how to sew a pair of Ava panties, but the techniques that I'm going to show you here will translate really well to a lot of my different sewing patterns. So I've already cut out my back and front panties piece as well as my gusset lining, which I've just cut out of plain organic cotton jersey. And I finished this upper edge, this straight edge, just with my serger. If you don't have a serger, you can use a zigzag stitch. I'm going to start by taking my front piece. I'm going to lay it out flat like that. And I'm going to take my back piece and I'm putting these curved gusset pieces together. And you'll notice that the curves are opposite, so we're going to have to kind of ease them together. So at this point you could baste it together. But I'm just going to do it all in one step. So I've lined those up roughly. I've got my right sides of my fabric together. And now I'm going to take my gusset lining with the right side of the lining against the wrong side of the panties back. And I'm basically sandwiching the panties back between my gusset lining and my panties front. So you'll probably want to stick a few pins in there. I'm going to omit the pinning step because I hate pins. I always forget to pull them out in time and I stitch over them. So I'm just using my sewing machine. You can use your serger. So you can see I'm just lining them up as I go. These do get eased together a little bit. So we now have something that looks like that. If you haven't serged it together, you might want to grade and notch your seams. So all you do is you just trim each layer back one by one, so that the first layer is the shortest, the second layer is slightly longer. Just going to leave that last layer and then I'm going to notch it. There, so it looks like that. And then when we fold the gusset lining up, it's nicely encasing all of that seam allowance, so we have a nice clean finish on the inside. At this point you want to just baste around here, just using a long stitch on your sewing machine just to keep your gusset in place. At this point we can start putting the elastic around the leg line. I'm going to use fold over elastic just because it's the easiest to find and comes in a lot of colors. I'm starting at the side point along the leg line. I'm using a zigzag stitch and I'm working on the wrong side of my fabric, so the inside of my garment. And my fold line is roughly running alongside the cut edge of my fabric. You can see I'm very gently pulling on the elastic as I apply it. I don't like it to be too snug around the leg. I have big thighs. So I pull it just enough to kind of stabilize this area. So I've really quickly applied my elastic using a zigzag stitch to the inside of my garment. And now you can see that my fabric extends beyond the fold line in some areas, so I'm just going to trim that back with a pair of small snips. So now that I've trimmed back all that excess fabric, I'm just going to fold the elastic along the fold line towards the front of the garment, and using a zigzag stitch, I'm going to top stitch that down. I'm going to do the same on the other leg line, just get that all finished up. So now our leg line is completely bound in elastic. The assembly method I'm going to show you here is not the only way you can do it. You can always do both of your side seams first and then sew your elastic in loops, but I just find this is a really quick and easy way to do it. So we're going to put right sides together. And I'm going to use a pin here to just pin my leg line together at the side seam. And you want to make sure that the bottom edge of each side of fold over elastic is meeting up perfectly. So you can pin that all together, and then with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, sew that together. I'm going to use my sewing machine first and then baste my edge, or sorry, I'm going to use my sewing machine first and then serge the edge. So it's really important that the edges of your fold over elastic meet up perfectly. I'm just going to run this through my serger. So there, we have one side seam done, and you can see how nicely that edge lines up. So if you have a little bit of an, if you find that it doesn't kind of perfectly match up here, you can always do a little hand stitch to pull it into place. So now that I've got one side seam done, I'm going to do my waist elastic in the exact same way that we did our leg line elastic. So starting at the inside of the garment, back to a zigzag stitch, I press all my seam allowance towards the back. Just like we did before, trim back your excess fabric. So we have something that looks like this now. We're almost done. Still with a zigzag stitch, fold your elastic along the fold line. We're working from the right side of the garment. So all of our elastic is done now. I'm going to turn it inside out. And I'm going to do the same as last time. I'm going to pin this together so that the lower edge of my fold over elastic meets it perfectly. And the same thing on the top. If you have a hard time getting these to match up perfectly, you can always do a few hand stitches first before you run it through your sewing machine. So now that the panties are assembled, we're basically done. The only last thing that I would do is to press my seam allowance towards the back and just do a little tack on my sewing machine to anchor it in place. Otherwise, that's it.